Today we've got our first U.S. Senate retirement for 2026, and this actually is a surprise. It's going to be Democrat Gary Peters of Michigan. He's not going to run for a third term next year in a key battleground state that Trump won. So we're going to look at this article from AP. We're going to look ahead to that election, and we're going to take a look at what happened previously. So let's get into it. We all know there's going to be some Senate retirements. There is every time. But if you thought it might have been Jeff Merkley or Jim Risch, maybe even Dick Durbin, you'd be wrong. It's actually Gary Peters. He's on his second term right now in Michigan, but he's going to call it quits. This opens up a huge opportunity potentially for the Republicans. However, Democrats have a deep bench in this state, and the national environment should favor them. And we just saw a couple of months ago, they just had an open seat in this state. Republicans made it shockingly close, and even as Trump won the state at the top, the Senate is a different story. So what's going on here with Peters? Well, not everybody has to be a career politician. 2 terms in 12 years is not nothing. It says here he's 66 years old, and the decision is unexpected. But then they do mention the strong bench for the Dems in this state, so Dems might have to divide some of the resources they're going to have to pull from their bench, but the state theoretically should be more in play now than if Peters ran for re-election. Although if Peters did run for re-election, this is one of the states Republicans were targeting anyway. Now here they mentioned Pete Buttigieg as a potential candidate. We'll get to him in a minute, but let's go down here a little bit more, and this is a state that Trump won by almost 1.5 points back in November. And in that election, they mentioned a longtime Democrat, Debbie Stabenow, shocked many by announcing she would not run for a 5th term. Now, I don't know if that was totally shocking. She was in her 70s. Another 6 years would take her around 80. Then they mentioned some of Peters' history here. He did serve in the House, and he also served as the head of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. And he might have delivered a stronger performance than expected in 22, and so far barely into this new Trump term. It does seem like there's been some crossover vote from Peters, along with Alyssa Slotkin. They voted with some of the very early Republican legislation. So this is a huge development. I didn't expect Peters to retire. I suppose there's always a small chance he reconsiders, but he was not at all at the top of my list on expected retirements. Now let's take an extremely early glance here on Wikipedia at that 26 Senate page. This is going to be a work in progress. I'm sure new names are going to be added as time goes on, but they've got 2 potential candidates here listed for the Dems. They've got Pete Buttigieg and Gretchen Whitmer. Now this is just 2 names out of a fairly deep bench of statewide elected Dems. They've got a bunch of other offices. Now you might just say they're both establishment-friendly consultant class Dems, but just of these 2, I think Gretchen Whitmer is clearly the stronger candidate. Some people are big Buttigieg fans, some people despise him. But Buttigieg did not even live in that state up until recently, so there could easily be claims of carpetbagging. And also Buttigieg has really never won a significant race. He was from a red state of Indiana, but he was never in the U.S. House, he was never a senator, a governor, so theoretically he moved to a more politically favorable state. But at the same time, that's going to hurt him because he's from Indiana, and this is Michigan. Definitely could be some sort of a rivalry there. So then we've got Gretchen Whitmer. I think she's very well liked by most Dems. She's also term limited in 26 as well. So similar to Brian Kemp running for that Senate seat in 26, it's the same dynamic here. If Whitmer is looking to continue in politics, she can make kind of a lateral move and head into the Senate. And given that it is an open seat, along with Dems having a deep bench, it would seem like Whitmer is easily the most likely candidate. I'm sure she's going to be getting a ton of questions from reporters asking her if she's going to run. And that was already on top of the speculation for 28. Now, I personally think Whitmer running for the Senate is a better move. I've always thought she would end up being a little overrated on a national level if she ran for president. So it's tough to really say, but Dems are going to have an open seat there for governor, and then they're going to have to defend this seat for the Senate. But they've got other names. They've got Attorney General Jocelyn Benson. The list goes on and on. Maybe Whitmer emerges as the clear favorite. Maybe it ends up being a bruising primary. But in this purple state, it's not one-sided, so we actually have to take a look at the Republicans here. And the one listed here is John James, who already ran twice for the U.S. Senate in 18 and in 20. At the time, James did seem like an electable Republican for the Senate in Michigan. But in 18, that was a blue wave, totally unfavorable environment for James to run in. In 20, he ran against Gary Peters. We'll come back to that in a minute, but he came up short. So with James already having 2 statewide losses back-to-back and not that long ago, that could be a big stain on his resume since he's already been rejected twice. He's since moved into the U.S. House, and he actually just barely squeaked by in that first election in 22. But James does seem likable. He could make it interesting against Whitmer. But whoever it is, I think the Democrat would at least be slightly favored regardless because of the expected environment. Now, if you're looking for some more potential candidates, we can go back to 2024 and take a look at that Senate race. So in that one, Alyssa Slotkin just barely defeated Mike Rogers. So other potential Democratic candidates are listed here, including Hill Harper, who is considered much more progressive. Then you've got a huge list here that declined to run in 24, but now that it's a new election, some of them might get into this race. There's a ton of candidates here, we can't go through them all. So if we go down here past the endorsements, we could do the same thing for the Republicans. And obviously, their top candidate here could be Mike Rogers, who again just barely lost to Alyssa Slotkin. But then you've got Justin Amash, you've got James Craig, Peter Meyer, and a bunch of other potential candidates here. Now, this is a unique state, especially for the Republicans. There's a lot of debate about who's going to be more Trump-friendly and who's going to be more establishment-friendly. So I expect Republicans to have a battle here in their primary. I don't think somebody's just going to walk away with it. So a lot of good stuff here, but let's see how Gary Peters did in his first win back in 2014. He won by double digits. He got 54.6% over Terry Lynn Land. I remember there was talk about Land maybe making this race competitive, especially several months before the election. But once the election rolled around, Land totally flopped. And even though the Republicans had a lot of success in the Senate this year, Peters still claimed victory by 13 points. And you can see in this county map, there's a lot more blue than we're used to seeing in the presidential election, especially up here in the Upper Peninsula. So Republicans in 2014 could not even get within 10 points in a favorable environment. What happened in 2020 when Gary Peters ran for re-election? Here it is against John James. Peters won. He was under 50%, but just barely. He was at 49.9. James at 48.2. And look at the county map again. This time, we've got a ton more red. So it was definitely a very competitive race. And if you go down here to the polling, Peters was ahead by 5 to 8 points according to the aggregates. So this polling definitely underestimated James, and it did overestimate Peters. It did not look like James was going to get that close, but he did. He almost flipped it. So there is some value for the Republicans with John James. But again, 2 consecutive losses is not a good look whatsoever. If you're curious about the last time Republicans won a U.S. Senate election in this state, we got to go back to 1994. That was the Republican Revolution. And this race surprisingly wasn't really that close either. Spencer Abraham won with just under 52%. And look at the county map this time. There's actually a lot more red on here compared to 2014, especially in the Lower Peninsula. So that's been more than 30 years the last time Republicans were able to win a Senate seat here. You could say maybe they're due, considering the shifting political dynamics of the state over the past couple of decades. Or we could say Trump is a unique figure, and without him on the ballot, the Dems should hold this seat pretty comfortably. And here's what Republicans are capable of in this state. Trump, at the top of the ticket, won it with 49.7. Harris got 48.3. A lot of these red counties are very dark red. And Trump also did not do terrible in Wayne County. So there is a certain percentage of people that came out, voted for Donald Trump, but then on the last Senate election, they left their ballot blank. That means Trump does have a unique appeal for a small segment of voters that are going to come out just to vote for him, and that's it. If Mike Rogers in the Senate got the same support here as Trump, Republicans would be holding another seat here. So that's what we're looking at here in Michigan. It's a massive bombshell, and we're only into January. But at the same time, not everybody wants to stay in politics until they're in their 80s. So the big question is Gretchen Whitmer going to run for this seat? I'm going to lean towards saying yes. If it's not her, I would think Democrats would avoid someone like Pete Buttigieg because he's not even really from that state up until recently. And are Republicans going to go for John James a third time, or are they going to go for somebody else? My guess is they might try somebody else because they can't risk James losing 3 elections in less than 10 years. So we've got to consider the primaries. We've also got to consider third parties. And we've got to consider what's going on for governor next year, including the other statewide elections. The state has gone back and forth politically with the governors, but the Republicans have had a big drought here in the Senate. We'll see if 26 is going to be their year to end that streak, or if the national environment is easily going to carry Dems to another term here. So that's it about Peters and some recent history about this Senate seat in Michigan. So let me know in the comments. How shocked are you about Peters not running? Do you think Whitmer is going to run? Do you think Pete Buttigieg is a strong candidate? What are the Republicans going to do, and how competitive is this seat going to be in the general? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.